If you want to support the channel on Patreon and other forms of social media, links are in the description below. In the Great Commons at Guy's Landing, we have a tall and particularly beautiful stand of white pine planted at the time of the first colonies. It represents our promise to the people and to planet itself never to repeat the tragedy of Earth. Geez, I keep on starting videos with these portentous quotes, don't I? I guess that's a consequence of this strange, viewer-led sci-fi bent I've been taken on. Certain genres lend themselves to such stylings. The future always makes me wax poetic. Or, in turn, makes Sid Meier wax poetic, I suppose. And hey, I'll review Sid Meier's Alpha Centauri one day, I'm sure. For now, though, I've got something a little older than that. Not one but two games from the Amiga and the Atari ST. Games where, like Alpha Centauri, we start by being pushed out of our home planet. If the human race is to survive, then it must rebuild. Let us look at Millennium 2.2 and its sequel, Deuteros, the Next Millennium. Because now that Gary's worms obsession has been sated, he's given me somewhat bigger fish to fry. These two games, and really there's no way you could do one without the other, start off with a bang. In 2200, Earth is rendered utterly uninhabitable when an asteroid strikes it. We do not see the results of this, but one can imagine that they were not pretty. With the entire population of Earth wiped out, all that's left are the colonies. One that's on the Moon, and another on Mars that's become a little mutated. You play as the Moon-based colony, and your goal is to explore the rest of the solar system and find other places where life can exist, with your ultimate goal being to return home and repopulate Earth. The Martian humans have much the same goal, but, well, let's just say that they don't see you as a potential ally. It is inevitable, ironic almost, that the last two bastions of humanity left would end up going to war with each other, but that's what happens here. Millennium is a classic game of resource management. You start with research and dealing with energy consumption, as you're going to want enough wattage to have a consistent production line while also maintaining the refinery. Eventually you'll want a bunker too, so that you can stockpile on important products. You never know when a surprise Martian attack or an accidental explosion will set you aback. Speaking of Martians, you'll want to build fighters and eventually orbital lasers so that you can defend yourself and, ultimately, bring the fight back to them. What's most important of all, however, is colonization. You always want to be building probes, sending them off to planets, moons and asteroid belts, finding out if they're inhabitable, and then either mining resources or taking them over. Does it all remind you of something? Slightly, perhaps. I am pretty sure that Ian Bird, the sole designer of both of these games, was inspired somewhat by the classic TV series Space 1999. The circumstances are different. In the TV show, a nuclear explosion on the moon's far side knocks it out of orbit and away from Earth, and Moonbase Alpha is left to fend for itself against new life and new civilizations, hope ever fading for a return home. It's not hard to see the couple of hundred inhabitants of your base in a similar way, with you as its Martin Landau, or Barbara Bain, whichever you prefer. A good resource management game allows you to create something of a narrative in that way. Especially when you encounter a spot of bad luck, an aforementioned explosion, or a brave crew that unexpectedly falls foul of an asteroid. It's all for the best cause, so that humanity can live on. At least the right kind of humanity, not those pesky, good-for-nothing, sneaky communist Martians. The Martians initially greet you frostily by saying that any attempt to colonize Earth or enter Mars space will be treated as an act of war. Pretty nice way to start a conversation. In any case, it's not long before they attack you, at which point you, at least early on, send fighters after them. You have a rudimentary, not exactly well executed bit of space combat here as you attempt to fend them off, and while it is only one craft at first, there will be more to follow. You're going to want to mine some uranium to get orbital lasers going, as really, once you have those, you're going to be sitting quite pretty. The Martian opponent is pretty much only interested in war and doesn't do much in the way of colonising herself, meaning that in truth, this game is actually somewhat easy. Long, but not challenging. So, good thing that the narrative and the general management is, in and of itself, very interesting. Millennium is a great exercise in minimalism. There's only a few screens in the whole game, and they are essentially tarted up spreadsheets for the most part. And yet there is an atmosphere in this nearly 30-year-old game. The sparse yet solid sound effects, the graphics that are there, crude as they may be, or David Whittaker's haunting version of Mahler's Fifth Symphony, Fourth Movement. Even a few spreadsheets can take on a lot of meaning when you give them such a lofty goal, the restoration of humanity, pushed to the very bleeding point of extinction. It might need a bit more for true lastability, different paths to victory perhaps, or more random elements, because as it stands, one game of Millennium does play much the same as another, right down to the locations of important resources. But still, it is a very noble effort indeed, and a sequel would result in something even better. 1991's Deuteros: The Next Millennium takes place 800 years after the first game, at the end of which the Martians were defeated and mankind won the race to resettle the Earth. But with Hell's Heart, the Martians stabbed at thee by destroying your original moon base, in essence leaving you stranded once again. Let's not forget, after all, that Earth was kind of hit by an asteroid a while ago, and no one's really been there since, so it's not like we can just take a trip to Cape Canaveral and get back up there again. Centuries have passed, but now mankind is ready to travel once more. Deuteros fits into quite a small niche, not just for games but media in general. It's post-apocalyptic. Almost a whole millennia has passed since the extinction level event that set this ball rolling, by which point, well, things aren't exactly the same, but mankind is still existent and producing, even if the population numbers a mere 6,000. At least that's what you think. Again, you mine resources and do research that will soon allow you to build shuttles, which then allows you to explore space once again, building orbital factories, and ultimately bases on other planets. And in doing this, you once again come in contact with the enemy. As it turns out, humanity isn't so sparse after all. Deuteros' enemy is the Methanoids, a race of human that, when you decided to repopulate Earth, decided to bet the other way and stayed out independent in space. In the 800 years since the first game, the Methanoids have grown to dominate the entire solar system and beyond. In the beginning, you barter with the Methanoids for needed goods, but after you build a few factories and get some traction, they quickly see you as a threat, and war is inevitable. Whereas you and the first game's Martians start out on a pretty even keel, the Methanoids are a great deal larger than you. As a result, Deuteros is much, much, much harder. A lot of people's impression of the game is as follows. Start off fine, get some building, get some nice foundations, do the usual resource management song and dance, then get annihilated by several hundred Methanoid fleets. The end. The game doesn't have a difficulty curve as much as it has a difficulty brick wall. Still, with the right management, you can fight them. Ultimately, you can attain hyperspace and conquer not just your solar system, but several others, if you play your cards right. And still, the game is dominated by only a small amount of screens, but the atmosphere is even greater here, with the constant humming and repeating sound effects, the sound of industry being brought back to life after hundreds of years, really adding something to this epic tale. The crew have more names as well, and there are alien messages that have been left out in space to be discovered that, eventually, will allow you to reach far beyond the Methanoids. Despite everything, humanity prevails yet again, greater than ever. There is again though some cruel irony, Yellow, in the two remaining sets going to battle instead of, actually working together. Reminds me of another post-apocalyptic game.
War. War never changes.
Perhaps that is the intention of Millennium and Deuteros, an ironic, somewhat depressing message that no matter what, there will always be war. Or, maybe I'm overthinking it, as usual. But usually in games like this, there are some options for diplomacy and peace. But in this world, it almost seems that even if there were just two people left anywhere in the known universe, they'd be sharpening sticks and getting ready for a fight. Deuteros just makes that clear. And it is a pretty great sequel. As tough as the game is, there is a lot more progression than the first game, and it certainly doesn't feel like the game can be won quickly. There's a definite shift from typical resource management to solely preparing for war, much in the same way you would find in one of Koei's classic historical games. Even the simplest spreadsheets, it turns out, can become an epic tapestry of conflict. Now, neither of these games were ever the most popular titles around, but they certainly do have their fans, and they are a wild, feverish bunch. They've also worked to make remakes of these two games widely available on more modern formats, in case you don't want to deal with the Amiga or Atari ST. But they sure do feel at home here as excellent, somewhat addicting products of their time. What they lack in true graphical excellence, they make up for in oppression, and forcing a sense of sheer obstinacy upon you. You would think that if anyone was hit by a trillion-ton asteroid, they'd simply give up, crack open a bottle and crawl into a shell to die out quietly. But not so here, no matter what those damned Martians and snivelling methanoids have to say about it. Humanity will always live on, to fight another day. Bye for now. The community gives thanks to the following: Adam Schaefer, Alex Stocco, Andrew Dalton, Andy Capt, Audie Sawley, Conformist, Daniel Briggs, Daniel David Taylor, Dustin Cooper, Gary Pinkett, George Newton, Ghostly Spectre, Grafham Blackpaw, Hunter, Ian Roberts, James Idd, James Loveridge, Jason Durso, Jason Goy, Jason Leach, Jason Stevens, Johan Eriksson, Josh Jensen, Lee Norris, Mark Johnston, Martin Pataki, Morten Skanin, Nanette McCrone, Nicholas Tristan, Olaf Albin, Peter Jack, Peter Sidorn, Phil Taprog, Pocky Southmaid, Rachel Maxwell, Romeo, Ryan Burford, Sammy Lee, Scott Coulter, Sean Zoltek, Seth Robinson, Simon Gulliver, Stephen Warner, The Unnatural, Tanyo J, Yucca Operator, and Zach Roach.